John Lynch, NFL and Fox analyst. He's got the Vikings and the Packers coming up this weekend. You can also see him on the Fox Football Daily weekdays at 6 p.m. on Fox Sports 1. Johnny, how are you?
DP, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. What'd you take away from the Saints win last night?
I think the Saints are a real good football team. And, I think a lot of people are making a lot about how do you play a game that close against the Falcons. But that's what happens in divisional rivalries. And I just think it's really interesting to me. People talk about head coaches make a big difference or not. I think the Saints are a great example. I watched them last year struggle mightily. And Sean Payton comes back, just his presence, and then bringing Rob Ryan in. And not only bringing Rob Ryan in, but I think Sean Payton's effect on Rob Ryan. He's got a better Rob Ryan because he's kind of molded him into the aggressive attitude, but a little more sound on defense. And they're having a fine year.
I also look at defenses now, and of course you played at a very high level, what these defenses can do. And the tight end, to me, at that size – that I can't put my hands on you, and with them getting position, I'm watching Tony Gonzalez, you're watching Jimmy Graham, some of these other tight ends around the league, and I said at the start of the show, if I'm a basketball player who played football in high school, knows I'm not going to the NBA, I'd certainly give football a tryout because with my size or speed, athleticism, and you can't put your hands on me, why wouldn't you look at that position as, the place where you can find a guy who can really change the fortunes of a team?
You make such a great point. I think the Gronkowskis, the Jimmy Grahams. You look at Denver, and everybody talks about the impact that Wes Welker. I think just as big or more is the development of Julius Thomas and what he's meant to that offense. These guys are such a mismatch. They can control the middle of the field. And like you said, Dan, in a league where you can't touch anyone anymore, they're just wreaking havoc.
Well, what would you, if I said you could choose that you had to play defense against Calvin Johnson or Rob Gronkowski?
Wow. None of the above. I think they're both incredible players. I think you can do more to stop a guy on the outside. Now, it hasn't worked with Calvin, but you can direct the defense. Tight ends are hard because they're in the interior there. The one mistake I think players, as I watch these games each and every week, look, I wasn't the most fleet of foot, but what I did well when I covered tight ends, Champ Daly used to have a saying, you get them early or they'll get you late. And that's the one thing the NFL does allow you to do is at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's where people fail. These guys are long striders. If you get them early, the best option is just to take them out of the read, and that kind of work gets done at the line of scrimmage. And for some reason, these defenders don't even try to do that.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. It seemed like that it was an obvious answer, Calvin Johnson, but my point is a tight end in the middle of the field. Now he's got the entire field, and these guys are so athletic. Jimmy Graham made a move last night, an out and up move, that's what wide receivers make. So you put that ability at that position, I got a linebacker or maybe I've got a safety on him. That's a heck of a mismatch. It
really is. It really is. There, everybody says, who is it that matches up? Well, what defender is 6'7" and 250? They don't have them. I had a buddy in Denver, and he's kind of he's a good guy. He comes up with these weird theories, and he said, what I would do if the Saints were playing the Patriots is I'd put Gronk on, Jimmy Graham and Graham on, and I said, what? I thought he was crazy, but the more I think about it, I think he's right.
Our poll question today is, moving forward with their football careers, would you rather have Peyton Manning's career or Tom Brady's?
Oh, gosh. That is a tough question. I think they both have been just unbelievable. I think scoreboard. So you got to look at championships, and I think Peyton Manning would tell you that. Now, I also would add the caveat that Peyton Manning's still hopeful that he's going to get a couple more championships. And I tell you what, their team is looking really good. And I think, as I mentioned, controlling the middle of the field. As I watched them at the end of last year, what people did was they knew they had those receivers outside. And so you take those guys out. Well, now you bring in Welker, you bring in Julius Thomas. Now you have to respect everything on that field. And I think that's going to be critical. Both those guys nicked up. I think it's critical for the Broncos that at least one of them is healthy, because then that makes the Patriots respect that middle of the field.
You got Vikings-Packers this Sunday on Fox. What did you find out about Aaron Rodgers' availability here the rest of the season?
Well, I think they're being pretty tight-lipped about it. It's a broken collarbone. I think Aaron's itching to play, and even though the Packers every game now has incredible urgency because they're kind of falling out of that playoff hunt, they've got to be smart for the long term with Aaron Rodgers, and the collarbone's not something you mess around. Tolzien has looked good, but I think it just shows you when you have a tremendous quarterback, an elite quarterback, how important they are to the team, because nothing else has changed on that team. Aaron Rodgers has been hurt, and they've lost 3 straight.
So when do you think Rodgers can come back, since it's his non-throwing shoulder? But, given that you got the stretch run here, can you see him after Thanksgiving that Rodgers is back in the lineup?
No, I think so. I think that was the original date. He tried to push it. I think they're hopeful they can eke out a win against the Vikings, and then hopefully you get Aaron back at that point and make a big push. I think the one thing that needs to happen, though, their defense needs to play better. They really do, whether they have Aaron or not, for them to make any sort of serious run. They've got to be better on defense. They've got to create some turnovers, and that just hasn't happened for them this year.
The Ahmad Brooks penalty, the hit on Drew Brees, I mentioned this yesterday to Rich Eisen. Isn't it enough that you penalize him and his team? Now, why do I have to fine everybody with these kind of hits?
That's the thing that is most disturbing to me. Look, the league has made a commitment that they're going to penalize these kind of things. I think it's ridiculous. I did a Jets game 3 weeks ago against the Saints, and they got him for going low at the knee area when it wasn't even at the knee. It was at the thigh. And so really that strike zone has gotten so small. But then on top of it, and I really feel like it's negative for the league, because every Monday it's like a police blotter. This guy got fined, this guy got fined. And I think it really does damage to one of the great realities of the sport, is that even though there's tremendous competition, there's a great respect amongst players. There's very few dirty players. And when there are dirty players, they stand out like a sore thumb. And when you find things like that, a good aggressive play by Ahmad Brooks, I think it kind of makes a mockery of the system and the respect that players have for each other.
Do you think the NFL cares about the health of defensive players?
I do. I think our commissioner's a good man. I think he really does genuinely care about players and their safety. I think at times he's misguided in how he's going about it. I think he feels at times like I got to be the one to save the game, and I've told him this. The game will save itself. I believe that when there's a dirty player out there, as I mentioned, they stand out. Players take care of that, and when there is a dirty play, I think it's pretty obvious. Suspend those guys. Come down harshly, but it's like when you have a kid. My mom always told me when we started having kids, make your nose count. And when you say no, 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 no all the time, players tune you out.
How would you police all of this on the field, though, John? The way you played, you couldn't play that way now.
It'd be difficult. It really would, because what happens now is when there's a violent play in the middle of the field, a physical play, it's going to be flagged, and then they're going to ask questions later. Well, that doesn't help, really, because, I was never worried. I didn't like getting my money taken, but I knew I was helping my team by letting people know that they were going in the middle of the field under their own peril, and there was nothing cheap. That's how the game was played. But now when penalties are being thrown, when you've got a chance of being suspended, that would make me think twice. So I think I'm in the right place talking about it, because I don't think I do too well in today's football.
Safe travels there with the Vikings-Packers. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks a lot, Dan.
All right, buddy. John Lynch, NFL on Fox.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.